I'll acknowledge my other speakers and Nina's a great example of a practitioner and a researcher. I don't know what she'd call herself, not embedded, she's it. She's both, which is quite unusual, but since 2010, as David said, I've had the great opportunity of being the CEPS Police Fellow, and so I'll be presenting today on my views and also some little research that has been done on what makes effective police researcher collaborations and partnerships. But I'll mainly talk about what I've learned over the last 2 years. And the other speakers will speak about more specific things. The CEPS Police Fellow role, most of you are aware of CEPS. It kicked off 2007, but I think Queensland Police, they were on board more or less straight away, and we had a police fellow in 2008. I'm the third. But it has evolved since then, as has CEPS evolved. It's a big beast with 4 universities, and it's obviously not easy, and particularly in those early days, I wasn't there, but it must have been trying to bring the 4 universities together must have been a massive challenge for Lorraine and the founding director. So the role now, I'm not another researcher, there's plenty of researchers there. I will help out to the best of my ability, but as you heard in my background, accounting and business studies really aren't too much into CEP studies, but they have had their moments. It's more about, and my role's difficult to define, it's more than liaison. It's about building relationships and bringing people together. There's 3 people have said when I first started, Mr. Doyle said it's about people and building relationships, and I thought, oh, that was just a nice soft word, but I think I know what he means now. Professor that comes out here, Professor Jeff Alpert, who's actually, I'll mention, has done some research in this area. He says it's about personalities. And so they're 2 things I remember particularly. It's about developing practitioner and academic partnerships. It's about providing a practitioner perspective. And this term came up, the embedded cop. Last year I was fortunate enough to go to the American Society of Criminology, and I was a presenter with some American colleagues, Jeff Alpert and some other people. Anyway, one of the other presenters was on the same topic, and he called himself the embedded researcher. He was a researcher in the police, and that's where I got the idea from. I've used it ever since, so I'd like to thank that person from Redwood in the US or whatever. When I first started in my role, the previous police fellow, Peter Hosking, had this definition of participatory research, but I really think it sums up what a good police practitioner researcher partnership is all about. And I've highlighted a couple of things: commitment to shared ownership, stepping out of our conventional roles and identities, and a willingness to adjust our views on things and our basis of knowledge. And the author there, I've actually got to meet Monique Marks from South Africa, and she's done some great work. I just thought, I won't read it out to you, I just thought, as time evolved in my role, I thought really that does sum up what a practitioner academic partnership's all about, and is about creating a culture. Talking about police researcher partnerships, what research has been done into police researcher partnerships? I got interested in this area probably from working with Professor Jeff Alpert, who CEPS have been grateful to hosted here a couple of times. Little is known about the prevalence or characteristics of such partnerships. As I said, there has been a study in the USA, but as we all know, there's 17,000 police services / forces over there, and it is different to here in Australia. there was only about a third of the police agencies that had any sort of kind of formal police academic partnerships. But I didn't find that too surprising in that there's 17,000 police, and most of the larger ones, and here in Australia our police services are all a reasonable size, did have some sort of partnership. It was interesting that in these days of evidence-based policing and a push for that, it has been pushed by the Chiefs, the International Association of Chiefs, which is the chiefs of police in the States. I love the way how the Americans always say international, like their basketball's the World Series. And these partnerships were built on a governance framework, shared responsibility, combining resources, and working together to achieve better results. And they're the authors. There's Jeff Alpert, and Jeff Rojek's a colleague of his. He's an ex-LAPD copper, so he's a little bit like Nina, although Nina's still a police officer. He's now an academic. There hasn't been any studies like that analysing police researcher partnerships in other jurisdictions, only bits and pieces. But I thought I'd let you know about that. But I think here at CEPS is a real working example of such a true collaboration as what that previous definition said and what the research has done. Now, I've added to this. I did this slide a while back, and that's why it's starting to get a bit too long, because there's things come to my mind, and this is just from my experience. Personalities are important, and at the bottom I've got mutual trust, respect and understanding. Seeing how, from a police officer's point of view, what the academics want and researchers want and what they're trying to achieve, and vice versa. It's about understanding each other. Historically there have been some inherent suspicions. I think it was said yesterday, academics or researchers used to examine or used to do research on police, now they do it with. But working on projects does establish credibility, and it was said today too that the process is just as important as the outcome. Well, outcomes for the police officers here are very important, as you know, but the process that leads to those outcomes does build credibility, and I do think it is just as important, and that can lead to further projects. Another thing I picked up early in the day is, early in my time here was, I noticed academics and researchers spoke a lot about outputs, whereas police tend to want outcomes, but I think that's coming together now. That's why, and it was said today, once again, I think by Dr. Stuart Thomas from Monash, police aren't concerned in reading a A-star journal that's very robust in its research, but it's long, and they just want to see an executive summary or a briefing paper. What's the true findings? And I think everyone has a feel for that. And I think a lot of organisations like CEPS, and we're not the only ones. We'll do briefing papers, we'll do short articles, etc. And I know Jeff Alpert in the States likes to put articles in police journals as well as academic journals, and you can achieve both of your performance indicators. Really, you can achieve your academic performance indicators as well as your impact on police by doing that. The benefits do outweigh the risks and costs generally. It's important that there's continuing dialogue and feedback. And a barrier to this on the police side of things is police always change their roles. Like even in my time at CEPS, for administration purposes, and I suppose for managing me out at CEPS, I go through Ethical Standards Command, and superintendent who I speak to, I've had 3, I think I'm on my 4th since I've been there in 2 years. So that police roles do change a lot, and I can understand the frustration academics would get. And it was reassuring to know, at least in Victoria, that they were still committed even though the roles changed. Know or appreciate each other's environment, and I'll finish up with talking about what the current environment is, particularly in Queensland, focus more on Queensland, but it's not dissimilar in other places. And the academia do offer independent evidence base to make or justify difficult decisions, and that's one of the biggest benefits for police organisations and management for that matter. And conversely, police are more than just a data source. We can offer real value to scholars, so it's a two-way street. QPS processes and perspectives. Do your research before you want to do the research with police. And Kim Adams, our Manager of Research and Evaluation, kindly put the QPS research priorities in your kit so you know what Queensland Police research priorities are. Having said that, if times change quickly, and in policing they do, and sometimes there can be things outside those priorities that do become a priority. In Queensland here, some smaller projects can be approved more at the local level, and that's just so the research committee doesn't get bogged down. Queensland Police, like many law enforcement agencies, we are moving and want more evidence-based policy and moving into the research space, and there is a lot more consultation with academia, so it is a good time. But be mindful that police, like a lot of other organisations, we do follow a lot of project management principles, you know, milestones, timelines, feedback. We still want those sort of things. Issues to consider. Does it fit with the research priorities? What impact will the research achieve? What outcomes will be delivered? What resources that are needed? It's important to engage at different levels of the organisation. You can get a champion at the top, but if the people who have actually got to do the work in the police and work with you, if they're not on board, they can just give piecemeal support. So it's important to engage with, and that's where my role can help a lot too. Are there any barriers? Need to consider the political environment at the time and the industry impact, and I'll go on to that, that's my last slide. Is it practical? Is it achievable? Is it consistent with the core business of policing, which at the moment is very much frontline policing? Is this new, or is it just more duplicated research? Timeframes and milestones, reporting requirements, as I mentioned earlier. Recent examples, the use of force in decision making, which we'll be working, which was commenced, and longitudinal study and shorter studies have commenced. Longitudinal commence next year. Use of force in decision making. It was mentioned by Assistant Commissioner Paul Doyle about the gifts and benefits policy. That was something where CEPS worked with the Queensland Police, and likewise police recruiting integrity guidelines. Some work's been done, some great work, police legitimacy, the Queensland Community Engagement Trial that Lorraine did, and there's still more work going on that. Michael Townsley's work on crime mapping and travel pathways, and that's just a snapshot really. Recently, financial crime and corruption in sport, we're working with Interpol there. Finally, know your landscape. The current situation, as you know, Mr Doyle mentioned it, my Assistant Commissioner, there is a change of government. We're having a new Commissioner. It is definitely tighter fiscal times. There's ever increasing demands and scrutiny on police from government, from oversight bodies, and we've got a couple here. But we work well with you. Media and community. The challenges, I suppose, in today's environment, and Queensland's not the only one, it's very difficult to obtain industry financial contribution. That's why, although it was refreshing to see Victoria's still providing some money. It's more easily to obtain in-kind support, and focusing on core policing, particularly frontline, and also police community relationships. But always when there's challenges, there's always opportunities that come out of this, and I see the opportunities at the moment. There's an ever-increasing need for decisions to be evidence-based, as I touched on earlier. There will be a reduction in consultancies across the whole of government because they cost a lot, and they're normally tailored to what the organisation wants. So they're less independent. Internal research capacity, they'll stay pretty lean and mean, as Kim knows. Academics offer independence, they offer expertise and robust research, and they're reasonably cost effective, more so than consultants anyway. And looking at an organisation such as CEPS, its inter and multidisciplinary capacity, and working with organisations such as CEPS or Monash, as Victoria Police have done, it gives you better access and ability to obtain research funding grants, because that's the core business academics are in. That's part of their core business. Police don't run around looking for grants. That's actually probably against our grain a bit, asking for money, and probably our business is keeping the community safe. But that's what the academics want, but they're used to obtaining money. And that's about it.